So this video will be the 10th weekly Jinx video, and pretty much for those that don't know, every week we do a video about Jinx in some capacity, whether it's her lore, how she's doing in the meta, a certain build, a certain matchup, things like that. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the new lore that dropped last week, as well as the story Wedding Crashers. But beyond that, we're going to also talk about some of the pros and cons some people had with the new lore, as opposed to what Jinx's character is in general, as well as talk about Warwick, Vi, Ekko, and then concluding with what do we think Jinx is in general. Like, why do we think Jinx is a certain way, or what do we like about Jinx to begin with, and as such, why then do we love this new lore and stuff, or do we dislike this new lore and stuff? So first and foremost, I'm just going to basically start off with what the lore was, the somewhat new lore, which is kind of still explaining that Jinx kind of has a somewhat dark and mysterious past still. We don't really still know her origins, if she was just always crazy to begin with, she just was crazy because, or that something happened to her, which all those things were speculated before in the old lore. Those things were never really confirmed that any of those were particularly true before, but it was something that wasn't as much confirmed as it kind of is now, which we'll get to later. Right now, I'm just going to kind of just give the general summary. Pretty much we got a little bit of Jinx's backstory of that we kind of don't really know where she came from, but she made her debut in Piltover on something called Roguery Night, which in my opinion kind of seems like it's April Fool's, and Jinx kind of took it over and just kind of made chaos about the whole situation, which then would eventually escalate into more crimes until she eventually marked the vault, Piltover Securus Treasury, for a heist that she was planning on doing. And the difference between this and the older lore is, yeah, in the older lore, they did talk about how Jinx and Vi kind of like confronted each other in the vault. There was like a vault incident, so to speak, but it wasn't as much in detail as this, to the point that it was assumed, at least by me, that when she marked the vault, she kind of did that, you know, instantly. There wasn't no delay in between. While in the new lore, it describes she marks this vault, and then it's like a plan in advance. It's something weeks down the road, to the point Piltover and Zaun are kind of on edge about how the results of how this heist might come down will go, as well as the fact of getting into the vault to begin with. She planned a way to get into the vault. She locked herself in a lockbox 2 days in advance to be delivered into the vault. And it was more of a planned thing than an impulsive thing, it seems like, with this new lore that plays out. In which case, it does afterwards play out a bit like the old lore did, in which case Vi and Jinx kind of like punched or blew their way through walls until they got deep into the vault, and then Jinx brought the entire vault down on them and then escaped while Vi had to kind of dig herself out. Now moving on to Wedding Crashers, it was a little bit more about Jinx specifically, like a day in the life of Jinx, so to speak, in which case she's in like a wedding, she's disguised herself so she could hide her weapons like within her clothes and stuff, and then towards the end of the story, she like takes out her weapons, starts blowing stuff up like the cakes, the food and stuff, doesn't actually kill anybody, and which in this new lore, it's also implied she hasn't actually killed anybody quite yet, so I wonder if they have to update that wanted poster that they did, in which case I think it might have had murder on there. But we'll talk about more about that later. In terms of Wedding Crashers, it's pretty much the short of it is she goes to a wedding, disguises herself with her weapons intact, and then eventually like blows up all the food in the feast, and then escapes out of a window into what's called a ring rider, and like rides off into the distance. Now, I'll start with both of these together collectively, talking about what some people liked about these stories, liked about the lore and liked about the story. First and foremost, that it was just a Jinx story, period. People were just happy to have Jinx content. Like, as popular as a champion as Jinx is, it's not that she should have maybe priority over other champions, like, oh, why doesn't she have her own miniseries by now or something like that? Heck, I wouldn't complain, to be honest. Obviously, I'm a Jinx fan myself, but I'm saying, in terms of like cinematics and stuff, we've only seen Jinx in ggGetJinxed. She only just recently showed up in the Star Guardian cinematic as well, in which case part of why people were hyped was that, hey, look, we get to see Jinx again outside of just skins and stuff. We get to see who Jinx is like as a person, because when it comes to that music video, that was kind of what I have friends to this day that still haven't really played League, but they like Jinx because they saw that music video. It was one of League of Legends on their YouTube. It was their most popular video for the longest of time, until Imagine Dragons Warriors took it over a little bit ago. But even still, it has over 55 million views. It's a very popular video, and it was cool to see, and a lot of people resonated with it. They related to the character through that video, and so seeing more just Jinx content was fun for some people. It also gave a little bit about how Jinx kind of came to be, and some people don't like necessarily the idea of trying to explain Jinx. Like, Jinx was kind of just to be, she does things just because, she does things impulsively, and she does things for fun, but some people kind of did want to know maybe a little bit about her, a little bit about her backstory, where she came from, or simply was she always crazy? Like my little sister, for example, was like, oh, was she always crazy? I honestly said, I don't know, maybe, and in which case she replies with, oh, maybe she went crazy when her parents gave her the talk. And I bring that up not to make fun of anybody. It's more so like people had their own theories about what make Jinx crazy. Was it that she fell into a vat of ace chemicals? Was it that she just slowly started going crazy because maybe she was alone all the time, so she started talking to herself? We just didn't know. And for some people that was fine. For some people it was not fine. They wanted to know. So it gives a little bit of like indication about what could possibly have driven her insane. She could have possibly been traumatized. She could have possibly been harassed, attacked, or abused by one too many enemies, or just seen one too many killings. She possibly was a completely innocent person that was a tinkerer that came to a bad end. These are things that were mentioned within the new lore that wasn't really in the old lore, that kind of gives Jinx some grounding. And we'll get to that a little bit more in a second with the con section. But in the pro section, especially with the story Reddit crashers, some people were happy simply because it just gave us more of Jinx. We wanted more of Jinx, and we have more of Jinx. Now, the question as we move into the cons was, did they give us more of Jinx in the correct way? And some people feel that not quite so much. And I'll start with the lore first, and the fact that there was so much parts of her, what she did, that was planned out prior to. That in the old lore, or just the Jinx we kind of knew of in general, she did things just because. She didn't really do things with a plan. Her crimes were without rhyme or reason, I believe was the verbatim of what the old lore said. And even in the Jinx AMA, which you can find up, I believe if you type in Jinx AMA like 2013 Reddit, you'll be able to find it. There are several Redditors commenting on the fact that if Jinx was walking down an alley past somebody with a knife, she wouldn't stab them because that would be boring. But if that same person was standing on the top of a pile of fireworks, she would blow it up without a second thought for the person on top of the fireworks because the explosion would be cool. And I think that plays into a little bit about why no one was implied being murdered in these new lore and stories, because Jinx doesn't technically murder people for the sake of murdering people. She just ends up killing people if they so happen to be in near or in whatever she wants to blow up, because it's an impulse. So people had issue with the idea that she planned how to get into the vault, that she planned her heist for like weeks or months in advance instead of it being an impulse action. Things like that. Sorry, I'm going to be swallowing a bit in this video because it's going to be a lot longer of a video than I wanted it to be. I'm sorry. I know I'm known for making so much short, quick, to the point videos, but this has a lot to talk about that I want to get a discussion on, so I'm sorry. But another problem some people had was with the story in particular. Jinx, the opening line started out with Jinx saying Jinx hated petticoats. Petticoats, I can't pronounce that right to this day. And that was a little bit issue for some people because Jinx only does things that she likes doing for fun. And some people might argue, okay, but the end result was what was fun, so she was willing to suffer through something that she didn't like to be able to get to the fun part. Some people would argue, but that's not the case. If that was the case, she would just kind of just do whatever she wants to do. She's impulsive. She doesn't really think about it. She just does things. That's part of why some people make the argument they even relate it to Jinx, was she was kind of the personification of just doing things for the heck of it, or because they felt like it, or because it was fun, not because it was like planned, intent, malicious evil going into it forwards or something like that. The story even mentions how she originally was going there to get all explodey with the observatory up top, in which case she was going there just to blow up the observatory. And then she kind of just changes her mind and does a little bit more of a thinking thing. One of the people I want to bring up and I want to give credit to, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. I'm so sorry, but it's it's either called, no, darn it. T B Skyen. I'm so sorry. T B Skyen. I'm so sorry I messed that name up like 17 times. I'm going to put their name up on a slide as well, put a link in there to the channel in the description below, as well as their video, because I thought they brought up several good points about how this character that kind of was not really Joker-esque, they could be compared to Harley Quinn and the Joker, sure, but they weren't really like in The Dark Knight how the Joker was seemingly crazy, but actually was planning out everything as it went along. That seems to kind of be the direction that kind of shifted Jinx towards a little bit more now that she wasn't prior to, and that's what some people's issue is. Jinx is at the core of her thing, she was about fun. Her brand of fun was blowing things up, sure, but it was more about fun than planning out things like this, because by putting plans into it, yeah, it could still be fun, but it kind of just, I guess it changed, for some people, it changed the character a bit more than they wanted it to be, as well as just trying to explain Jinx when she's supposed to be the personification of chaos as well, trying to explain Jinx by giving her in the lore a bit of a backstory about how she was more of a tragic character. Maybe she wasn't just always crazy, but something tragic happened to her, and now she's crazy because of the results of that, or she's crazy because she wants to get back at whoever she felt wronged her, or something like that. We don't know, of course, because nothing more stories came out, but these things have been implied or implicated by some people that don't necessarily like the direction the lore or the story went. And I could see it. I'm not going to give my own opinion too much on either side of the story. This video is just to give you both of them so we can have a general discussion about what has become of the character of Jinx going forward. One thing I will mention is Auguste Browning. And if that name sounds familiar, he's known as Auguste, Jinxie Lord. He changed his name from Gypsy Lord really quick for those that don't know, because now that Riot is a global company, Gypsy is something of an offensive term in certain parts of like Europe or Europe West, I guess. So upon realizing that, he wanted to change his name to something less offensive that wouldn't offend more people. Even though originally he named himself that because his dog was named Gypsy, a dog that he used to have as a kid in Alaska that would defend him against like bears and stuff out in the wild. So it wasn't initially malicious intent either, by the way. Just putting that out there though. So his name is now, you can find him at Riot August or Jinxie Lord on Twitch. And I bring that up because you can go on his Twitch whenever he's streaming, and in between games, he'll do Q&As. So you can ask him stuff about the characters that he's done kits on, because he's one of his biggest fans of the characters as well. And one of the things that he brought up that I thought was interesting to say was, when it comes to Jinx and the whole for fun thing and the whole chaos thing, the whole issue like that, I asked the question, what is something that is actually in character for one of the champions you worked on to do that people wouldn't expect to be in character, but actually is? And his answer, I wish I had the audio, but the VOD got muted because there's copyrighted music on it. But the answer was pretty much, if Vi and Caitlyn could convince Jinx that working in a soup kitchen was fun, Jinx would do it. Because Jinx's thing is just about having fun. Like in the old lore, the whole reason she brought chaos to Piltover was because she found that place dull and boring. So she wanted to bring her own brand of fun, pandemonium, to it. So in this particular instance, with Auguste's answer, it just implies that Jinx's thing, first and foremost, is just about having fun. What that fun is dictated by what Jinx wakes up and decides is fun. And I thought I just would throw that in there as another talking point for another conversation. But now, towards the end of the video, I'm sorry this is super long, I want to talk about Warwick, Vi, Caitlyn, even Ekko. Because one of the things I want to mention about Ekko is when we first get introduced to Ekko 2 years ago almost, he talks about how he used to have a crush on Jinx until she started talking to the gun. And that implies that yes, even before this new lore and story came out, there was a pre-insane Jinx in some capacity. That Jinx was not always insane, but always did have a sane before she went insane. And I can't find it. I swear it exists. It might have even been August. I might have to hit him up for it and ask him about this. It might have been him himself. But somebody mentioned maybe in the AMA that her hair wasn't always blue. She wasn't born with blue hair and wasn't born with like the pinkish red eyes either. So it's implied that could have just been for fun, for kicks, of course, like Riot does. It's how the whole they won't confirm if Vi or Jinx are sisters things. That's still up to interpretation. So that also could just be for fun as well. But if that is the case, then there always was like a pre-insane Jinx. This just kind of more confirms it. Some people kind of don't like that idea because they kind of don't want to know more about Jinx. They're kind of okay with just this being a Jinx, and they want to know more about her going forward, more about her antics going forward and things like that. But I bring up Ekko because recently it came out that they were potentially reshaping the world as far back as Ekko's lore when they came out with the comic. And as such, when the comic first came out, potentially they already had the idea of fusing Zaun and Piltover into the same world. So in other words, even though Ekko came out 2 years prior to when the universe came out, they had already started universe back then. So Jinx's character might have not always been pre-insane, but they changed Jinx's character initially way back then with that quote. Which is why I want to move on to Warwick next, because obviously that stirred a lot of, talk conversation. He had the lines, Jinx was there and let me forget. To the point that when Warwick's story came out, a lot of people are implying that the little girl in Warwick's flashbacks is potentially a pre-insane younger Jinx. And either something Warwick did to her, or something that happened to Warwick in front of her, or maybe Warwick killing somebody in front of her, something like that, caused her to go crazy. Which is also kind of want to bring up Vi real quick while we're talking about Warwick, because he has a line for Vi saying, Zaun needed you. Which, if you go into the whole sister theory, okay, if they were sisters, or even not sisters, but just like related in the same group, something like that, maybe it implies some tragedy happened. Something really bad happened that because Vi wasn't there, they were outnumbered. They lost footing. Something, bad happened because they needed more people and more people weren't there. Vi was gone. In which case, Warwick had to step in and either something bad happened to him or he had to do something bad in front of Jinx or with Jinx nearby, something that traumatized her, and maybe that's why now she's angry with Vi, even though it's not really implied that she's angry, but maybe that's why she's like tormenting, like messing and harassing with Vi, because Vi was kind of responsible, or her lack of presence at this traumatization or incident or something is why now Jinx is the way she is, and why maybe Vi's even come back. Maybe she feels guilty, and that's why she joined the police force over in Piltover. We don't know. We're going to have to find out more as the event goes on. It's implied that maybe the event's not also fully over. In which I want to briefly touch on Caitlyn as well. Caitlyn was dubbed the Hat Lady. Like, Caitlyn does kind of have a, I don't want to say beef, it's not the right word, but there was a relationship there between her and Jinx, the way that she also antagonized Vi. The best way I could describe this is not a good analogy, but for the people, also because I'm not good at explaining stuff, but for the people that kind of have no idea what I'm talking about, that kind of want to know, if I could best describe this kind of relationship, it would kind of be between like Jim Gordon, Batman, and the Joker, in which case, Caitlyn would be more the Jim Gordon. She'd be the more like law-abiding, upstanding kind of part of the law. Caitlyn would be, or Vi, my bad, would be more of the Batman, in which case, yeah, on the right side of the law, but kind of more her own way, right? If there isn't a door, make a door kind of idea, right? And then of course Jinx being the Joker, and that whole, if she's like the tough, somewhat serious version, Jinx is kind of like the chaotic jokester, right? Not because they're like the perfect like parallel clone copies of those characters, just that kind of idea. In which case, Caitlyn kind of wasn't really mentioned at all in this story, and that kind of goes back to possibly some people's disliking in Caitlyn's story, how she went from being the sheriff of Piltover to kind of being a sheriff of Piltover, a well-known sheriff of Piltover, but only a instead of the. So maybe it's part of why she wasn't mentioned that much. I'm assuming it's still somewhat the same relationship. They just didn't mention Caitlyn as much. But it would be kind of unfortunate to see that kind of disappear, because I thought that was a cool dynamic, as well as, I'm going to pronounce your name wrong again, I'm so sorry, T B Skyen. They also mentioned this in their video. I'm going to link that video in the description below as well. I think you should go check out that video. So in conclusion though, I want to talk about what Jinx is. What is it that attracted us to the character to begin with? Why did we like the character? And did the lore, are you on the pro side? You're like, the lore is fantastic, you're just happy that there's just more Jinx content, things like that. Or are you more on the con side, in which case you feel like, yeah, I'm happy there's more Jinx content, but they changed so much about her that she seems like a little bit of a different character. Like, you still like the character, you're still going to play the champion in the game, but as a character you feel like they've actually been changed quite a bit. And that's kind of part of the question I want to leave this video on, because it's a bit too long. I'm so sorry this video is almost 20 minutes long, but I feel like all those really needed more in-depth talking to than my usual quick short style could get across. Now, for those that are still listening at this point, if I was supposed to give my own opinion, I think I would say, do look at some of the criticisms, even if you don't agree with them, because I think for me, I was more blinded on the fact that, hey, I was just happy there was more Jinx content. I never took a really good look at, is this the Jinx that I know? Do I even care if it's the Jinx that I know? Am I just happy that there's more content? Things like that. But beyond that, I will just leave it up to open discussion and stay neutral beyond that. So for those that are new to these kind of videos and are watching this kind, or have watched this far, every Wednesday we do a Jinx video. They're usually like 10 times shorter than this, so I'm so sorry this is so long. But what happens is, in the comment section now, we have a discussion about all the things we talked about in the video. And it's free for anybody to comment however they want, however opinion, it's all open and welcome. This will also be posted in the Jinx subreddit, so we can have a discussion there, weekly discussion thread there using this video. But furthermore, if whatever you want me to talk about in next week's video, you also have to comment down in the comments below, either there or on Reddit, so I can then put the video together for next Wednesday as well. But that's all for this video. Thank you for watching this very long video if you did watch this far. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe as well, but you don't have to. But also, if you want more quicker updates and video updates, feel free to follow me on Twitter as well, at TheFireGodIFS. But I don't know which video will be next, because life can be quite a mess. So until next time, take care from TheFireGodIFS. Thank you for watching.